It's February, and that means 80% of people have already failed to stick to their New Year's resolutions and goals. But why is this? Is it because we're lazy, plain stupid, or just useless? Fortunately, it's none of these things. It's just the fact that most of us have never actually learned the underlying mechanics of how long-term behaviour change occurs. And so today's video will explain exactly why we're failing to stick to New Year's resolutions and goals, and what we can all do to quickly overcome this. Firstly, why do we fail to stick to these new behaviours, whether it's exercising more, eating better, or reading more books? Well, it's because of three lacks. Either a lack of motivation, a lack of ability, or a lack of prompts. And these three components make up BMAP, the behaviour model proposed by Professor BJ Fogg. Now you've stopped laughing at his name, let's break this down. For any behaviour to occur, you need sufficient motivation, sufficient ability, and also, perhaps most importantly, sufficient prompts in order to get you to do it in the first place. We pee because our bladder screams it's full, we eat because our stomach grumbles, and we check our phones because they buzz or our brain prompts us with a subconscious urge that it's bored and wants some dopamine. And from his research, BJ Fogg found that people often fail to stick to new behaviours because of not just a lack of motivation, but often more so a lack of reliable prompts that make the behaviour natural and seamless. So we say we'll eat more healthy food, but where is it? It's in the bottom of the fridge in the crisper, out of sight and therefore out of mind. There's nothing screaming out at us to eat the apple. But even when you have those prompts, there are some times where you just can't be bothered because motivation is incredibly unreliable. It fluctuates day to day, hour to hour, and even minute to minute. And to do anything new requires a lot of effort and motivation. You have to remember to do it in the first place, and you also have to actually do it, which is often time consuming and quite arduous. So because of a lack of reliable prompts and also an over-reliance on motivation, people easily give up on their New Year's resolutions. It's very rarely an ability issue. We all know how to eat apples or run on a treadmill. So what can you do about this? Well, you can start by engaging in what Fogg ended up calling tiny habits. The idea is simple. Take any behaviour you want to start implementing or removing, and then just find the smallest behaviour or step for doing just that. The reason is that this smallest behaviour reduces the reliance on motivation and makes it as easy as possible to do in relation to our ability. But here's the catch, you want to attach that small behaviour onto an existing routine of yours, something that you just do in your day-to-day life. And again, that just reduces that reliance on motivation even further. So Professor Fogg's own original experimentation of this came when he wanted to lose some weight. He knew that he needed to do press-ups, but would always find excuses not to do them. So he decided to break it down. Instead of doing one big workout, he thought to himself, how can I incorporate some bite-sized exercise into my daily routine? He thought, let's find an existing routine and just tag on 2 push-ups to that routine. And he decided to pick something that he did several times a day. Go for a pee. His prompt was, after peeing, I'll do 2 push-ups. And that was it. And seriously, stay with me on this for a moment, because I was thinking the exact same thing when I first came across this. He started doing this, and over time those 2 push-ups became habit, a tiny habit, after every pee. It helped that he worked from home, so he wasn't dropping down in typical piss-soaked floors that you're probably thinking of. And 2 push-ups became 5 and then became 10, and after about a year and a half he lost around 15 pounds, just from initially doing push-ups after peeing. And here's the other thing, after doing his tiny habit, Fogg would then celebrate. So literally after doing these 2 push-ups, he would then say to himself, I'm awesome. Again, stick with me on this one. And the reason for this is that Fogg found that long-standing behavioural change can only occur if we've got sufficient rewards for doing the behaviour. But the problem is that most of us delay those rewards. They're too distant and too far off. But we actually all need instantaneous rewards as a marker of good neurobiological feedback that something is worth doing again and again. And he makes a good point when he relates this to how we help babies learn to walk. Parents will celebrate their child's steps at just the right time, with a clap, a wow, or a good girl. They don't do this because it's a remarkable achievement, instead it's simply reinforcing. It reinforces that taking a step was a good thing and that it should be repeated. And celebrating at the right moment helps babies and children learn more quickly. And as adults, we're just the same. So with this information, Fogg ultimately developed his formula for tiny habits, a simple 3-component process. First, find your prompt or trigger. Second, do the tiny behaviour. And third, celebrate. And there's now countless pieces of research and case studies to demonstrate that this can be used for pretty much any behaviour imaginable. Fogg has used this model to help consult dieters to keep weight off permanently, and also use tiny habits to reduce burnout in hospital nurses. The reason this works is that it makes new behaviours as easy as possible to do, which ticks off both the issues we have surrounding motivation and ability. And the prompt means that we don't have to remember and therefore rely on willpower, which is a finite resource that depletes throughout the day. And so how does this lead to dramatic change? Well, it acknowledges that any form of progress has to be gradual. If you can improve or increase your efforts by 1% each day, then that compounds over time to lead to dramatic improvements. So if you want to read more books, start off with 10 minutes reading a day after you wake up or brush your teeth at night. After a week or even just a few days, 10 minutes will become 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and even an hour a day. And when it comes to eliminating bad behaviours, it's often the case of just removing the prompt or replacing it with something healthier. I've done this in relation to using my phone for a few years now, so I know that the prompt is either vibrating or dinging. So every day when I sit down to do work, I put my phone on silent, and so that removes the prompt of those buzzes and dings that cause me to constantly check my phone all the time. And remember to celebrate, so every time that I did put my phone on silent, I'd give it a little thumbs up, like that. Sounds weird, but it did work. And over time, once something becomes habit, you don't have to celebrate every single time you do it. It's just more so in the case of the initial stages of either trying to add or remove a habit. So from understanding tiny habits, it's clear that we fail to stick to New Year's resolutions because we either start too big or we assume that we've got this unlimited pool of motivation, which actually only lasts a week or two, and then we're completely zapped and we just can't be bothered anymore. But tiny habits, these are what lead to long-standing behaviour change, because we can use prompts in our existing environment to then tag on very tiny forms of behaviour that we're trying to implement, and then if we celebrate them instantly, we'll want to keep doing them again and again. It's that simple. So start tiny, and you'll be able to go on to achieve any goal or resolution that you set for yourself.